Welcome back to the Jones Gallery Lecture Series. I'm Sarah Jones, the curator at Jones Gallery. And for you today, I'd like to talk about one of my favorite paintings in one of my favorite churches in Rome. Today we'll be discussing the Madonna di Loreto by Caravaggio, which is housed within the Basilica di Sant'Agostino, like I said, in Rome. This is it. This is the exterior. This is a beautiful, beautiful church. And I promise you that if once all this COVID situation is over and we can once again go back to visiting the great art sites of the world, and if you are tired by the hustle and bustle of kind of more infamous or more kind of well-traveled spaces in places like Rome and Florence, so you know what it's like. You're being kind of jostled from all angles. Seek out the Basilica di Sant'Agostino because you will be the only person there in this beautiful church. Look at this. I'd like to dwell on the interior, but I won't. I'm going to get to Caravaggio. But like I said, you can see that they have a Caravaggio painting. There aren't that many Caravaggio paintings in the world, and there's only the thing with Caravaggio is that his work doesn't travel. Like it's installed in these churches. So if you want to see Caravaggio paintings, you have to go to Rome. You have to go to Naples. Like they don't leave Rome. They don't leave the churches in which they're housed, as opposed to an artist like Vermeer, where it's just a different. They're not Vermeer's paintings aren't necessarily. Most of them aren't necessarily installed in churches. They're in museums or private collections, and they can move around the world a lot easier. So you can have a big blockbuster Vermeer exhibition in New York or in London. But you can't really with Caravaggio because Sant'Agostino isn't going to loan the Madonna di Loreto to somewhere else because it's part of the sacred space. It's integral to the space. Where was I going with this? Yes. So there aren't many Caravaggio paintings, like I said, in existence. He painted large works. It is possible to see all of them, I think, in a lifetime, and so a lot of the spaces in Rome where you're going to see them, they can be quite crowded. You're always kind of being jostled and elbowed, and people straining to get ahead of you and see these paintings. But for some reason, nobody goes to Sant'Agostino. And I mean, this painting isn't one of his most famous works, but it's still, I promise you, it's still going to knock your socks off. And you'll probably be the only person there. So it's a nice respite from the usual, I think. This is us. This is my brother and I. That's my brother. We were the last time we were there. Like I said, there's maybe just a handful of people in the entire church, and we had this Caravaggio painting all to ourselves. It was pretty amazing. And this is it. This is the Cappella Cavalletti, and then the painting in question, the Madonna di Loreto, which we'll be discussing. This chapel was funded by a patron named Ermete Cavalletti, who donated a rather large sum of money for the purchase and furnishing of a burial chapel. So he wanted to be buried here within this space in Sant'Agostino, and he wanted the chapel to be dedicated to the Madonna di Loreto. He participated in a pilgrimage to Loreto, which is a town in Italy. It was, at the time of Cavalletti, at the time of Caravaggio, was a very popular pilgrimage site. It still remains a popular pilgrimage site to this day. The story behind this, it's not very well known, so I'll outline it briefly. But the story behind the Madonna di Loreto it has to do with the Casa Sancta, so the holy house of the Virgin or of the Madonna. The story is that the house, the Casa Sancta, was miraculously moved from the Holy Land by angels, and it was flown essentially to the few stops along the way, but it was flown to what is now Italy, a town called Loreto, like I said, centuries ago. And so pilgrims, it was a relatively easy pilgrimage site. So it was within reach. So if you couldn't make it to Jerusalem, for instance, or Santiago de Compostela, you could make it to you could make it to Loreto to go visit the Casa Sancta. And so Ermete Cavalletti had this connection because he had participated in a pilgrimage, and that's why he wanted the decoration of this chapel to do with, or to be themed around, the Madonna di Loreto. And Caravaggio's paintings, it wasn't Ermete himself who hired Caravaggio, but it would have been the executors of the will, or kind of the descendants of Ermete Cavalletti who were fulfilling his wishes in his will, kind of left for this burial chapel. So Caravaggio received the commission 1603, 1604, 1605, kind of in there, and completes this again, a rather large religious commission, rather large religious painting that we see here. It's about 2 meters high by about 1.5 meters wide. Oil on canvas, as kind of typically we see with Caravaggio, like his other paintings that I've discussed in other videos. Now, I'll show you just briefly. I want to compare Caravaggio's treatment of this subject with a contemporary artist, an artist named Nibile Carracci's version. And I wanted to show you how Caravaggio really departs from the pictorial tradition. So just briefly to set this up, here we have the Madonna figure on the left, standing on the step of the Casa Sancta. We can identify this as the Casa Sancta, or viewers would have been able to identify this immediately as a Casa Sancta because of these. They had the Sacred House had these red bricks, which we can see just over the Mary's left shoulder, so kind of to the right of the frame. There's a bit of the red brick exposed, and pilgrims or kind of anyone familiar with the Casa Sancta, it just had really distinctive red bricks. So look at bricks. Oh, this is the Casa Sancta. So here Mary's standing on the step. She's posed actually quite elegantly. So her knee, you can see, is kind of folded over one leg. One leg is folded over the other. That's a better way to say that. And she's resting her this rather large Christ child. Caravaggio depicts the Christ child is quite as like kind of an older toddler in a few paintings. Here she's kind of resting the Christ on her hip. And her and the child are both looking down at what we can identify as pilgrims who have recently arrived. And we can identify them as pilgrims just by the way they're dressed, kind of the wear and tear on their clothing. Obviously, they've traveled a great distance. Their feet are bare. Their feet are dirty. They're wearing traveling cloaks and carrying staffs. And you can see they've kind of sunk to their knees to receive the blessing of Christ here. So very simple composition, only 4 figures. There's very little background detail. We see no landscape here. The only architecture we're seeing is just the door frame and the step, and then, like I said, that little bit of brickwork. Compare that to Nibile Carracci's version, which was completed roughly around the same time, 1605. And here, Carracci gives us this is kind of the more typical execution or depiction of this scene, or treatment of this scene, I should say, where the Madonna and the Christ child are essentially enthroned on top of the Casa Sancta. So Carracci has thrown perspective and realism right out the window, guys. No, I shouldn't phrase it like that. That was just this is kind of a traditional way of showing this. But you can see here that the Madonna is overly large. The Casa Sancta is depicted as being very tiny. Like, obviously she can't fit inside that house. The house isn't supposed to be that small. And here we have a number of angels that are in the midst of transporting the Casa Sancta to its eventual resting place in Loreto. We can see a great deal of the landscape. It's a much busier composition. And as I kind of flippantly said, but Carracci isn't so interested in realism or depicting a a true to life or kind of a natural, this isn't a naturalistic approach, I would say, right, to the scene. So compare that, Caravaggio, with Caravaggio. Like, just sit down, Caravaggio. You know? Caravaggio, this is such a great painting. So here, like I said, Caravaggio pared down everything. It's very, very naturalistic. There's no depiction of kind of the mystical or the supernatural in an overt way, other than perhaps those two faint halos around the head of Christ and Madonna. But there are no angels. Like the house is very firmly planted on the ground. Like we've seen with Caravaggio before, he depicts the holiness of the moment or the sacredness of the moment through composition, through the treatment of light. So here the light is flowing over the shoulder and over the heads of Mary and the child, and is flowing, and it's landing fully on the faces, the upturned faces of the pilgrims. So we can see, again, we read the light as a metaphor. It's a metaphor for divine light or divine illumination. And it's very, very carefully composed. So we have these tight horizontal and vertical lines with the step and then the framing of the door. So strong horizontal and vertical. And then the pilgrims and the gestures and the bodies of the figures within this kind of tightly composed space can then form curves and diagonals, and so our eye can move kind of from one figure to the other. And there are interlocking gestures here as well. So we follow the head of Christ and the light flowing down the arm of Christ, and it illuminates his finger, that finger outstretched in blessing. And you can see that his finger, Christ's finger, is pointed at the forehead of the female pilgrim. His toes are pointed at the head of the male pilgrim, where his other toes are pointed at the hands of the male pilgrim. Mary's fingers that are kind of clutching the child are accentuating or underlining echoing the gesture of her child as well. The color blocking again locks the composition in together. So we have the yellow pants here of the pilgrim, and kind of these darker tones or more earthen tones in the lower right. And it forms like a color chord or a color triad, so the yellow and then the red and the blue that the Madonna is wearing. And contrast the differences of the textures of the garments as well. So we know like there's something different about Mary, right? That she's again he's it's not like a Caravaggio. It's not like Mary's on a throne, like she is being crowned literally by angels. She is different and special and above us. But Caravaggio doesn't hammer us over the head with that so much. It's a much more subtle treatment of Mary's divinity here. And it's shown in the kind of the sumptuousness and the color choice of the clothing. So we can tell that her, like there's something, again, there's a richer texture to her clothing here, and the diaphanous of that veil kind of around her shoulders. So she's one step up, right? So she's just separate from us, but then also still connected through those gestures. Us, we're on the level of the pilgrims, right? Like we're looking up at Mary. So instead of looking down at the pilgrims, like we are on the plane of the pilgrims looking up. According to Caravaggio's biographers, Baglioni and Bellori, there was a bit of consternation about the bare feet of the pilgrims, that lacked decorum, bare feet stuck out. That may have been his biographers might have been making a point. Caravaggio got in trouble before for sticking bare feet kind of in the face of the viewers. You can watch my video on the inspiration of Saint Matthew for that, and it was rejected actually. This is an earlier one with bare feet. Anyway, side story. But probably not. There's no record of this painting being rejected for lacking decorum. What I'm talking about are the bare feet of the male pilgrim here that we can see. This would be very much on level of, like, our eyeballs are level with the dirty bare feet here. But the tradition of the pilgrimage to Loreto, there was a tradition of going barefoot to Loreto, so it's kind of in keeping with the realism of the story and the realism of the pilgrimage tradition. So probably made it okay. We might have gotten in trouble more is that he's using the story is that the Madonna figure was a woman with whom, or the model that he used for this Madonna figure was a woman that he was having a bit of a dalliance or a liaison with. Her name was Lena. So, I mean, I've read different places. She was maybe a prostitute, maybe not but anyway, just, some kind of relationship with Caravaggio. He just is so kind of true to form that he would just be like, well, I need a model for my Madonna figure, and Lena, how about you? Instead of using someone kind of more stereotypically or kind of conventional, idealized beauty here, she's still very beautiful, but her features are identifiable. Like, we're looking at the features of a real person here. There's no real record of what the reaction was to dressing Lena up as the Madonna, but one can imagine. And there we have it, Madonna di Loreto. Go see it when COVID is over. Go take thee to Sant'Agostino. So thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to our channel. Many more videos coming soon. I would also like to thank the Sheila Hugh Mackay Foundation for their generous sponsorship of the Jones Gallery Lecture Series. Until next time.